The return of Jesus, peace be upon him, in Islam is not a symbolic idea or a metaphorical belief, but a real future event grounded in authentic revelation and prophetic teachings. Islam presents a clear, detailed, and coherent narrative of what will happen when Jesus returns to earth near the end of time. This belief is deeply rooted in the Quran and the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and it carries profound spiritual, moral, and global significance. Islam teaches that Jesus was not crucified nor killed, but was raised alive by God, protected from his enemies, and preserved for a future mission. His return is not about starting a new religion or canceling previous revelation, but about restoring truth, correcting false beliefs, and establishing justice in a world overwhelmed by deception, chaos, and moral collapse. The return of Jesus will occur at a time when humanity will be experiencing one of its darkest periods. Truth will be distorted, morality will be upside down, oppression will be widespread, and faith will be reduced to empty rituals. Power will be in the hands of the arrogant, deception will dominate global narratives, and materialism will replace spirituality in this environment. Islam teaches that a false Messiah will appear, spreading confusion, performing deceptive signs, and claiming authority that belongs only to God. This figure will represent the peak of human arrogance and deception, and millions will follow him, believing he offers salvation, security, and power. The return of Jesus will mark the end of this deception. Islam describes that Jesus will descend from the heavens near the region of Damascus, supported by angels, not as a king seeking power, but as a servant of God fulfilling a divine mission. His descent will be a moment of clarity when truth confronts falsehood directly upon returning. Jesus will not bring a new book nor a new law. He will follow the final revelation sent to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, demonstrating continuity between prophets and unity of divine truth. One of the most powerful actions Jesus will perform upon his return is the correction of false beliefs about himself. Islam teaches that Jesus will openly declare that he was never God nor the Son of God, and that he never asked people to worship him or his mother. This correction will shake religious structures built on centuries of misunderstanding. It will not be an act of anger, but of truth and mercy, clearing confusion that misled generations. This moment will resonate deeply with sincere believers across the world, including many in the United States who are increasingly questioning inherited doctrines and seeking faith grounded in clarity and reason. Jesus will break the cross, not as an attack on Christianity, but as a symbol that the belief in his crucifixion and divine sacrifice is no longer valid. He will restore his original message: worship God alone, obey him, and live righteously. This act represents the end of theological distortion and the return of monotheism in its pure form. Jesus will also defeat the false Messiah, ending the era of deception, manipulation, and spiritual fraud. Islam describes this victory not as a political conquest, but as the triumph of truth over illusion. After this moment, the world will enter a period of justice, peace, and moral restoration. Jesus will rule with fairness, compassion, and humility. He will not favor any race, nation, or class. He will judge by divine guidance, not personal desire. This resonates strongly with American values of justice, accountability, and equality under the law. During his rule, wealth will lose its excessive value because injustice and exploitation will end. People will live without fear, and trust will be restored among communities. Even nature will reflect this peace as harmony spreads across creation. Islam teaches that Jesus will revive the true meaning of faith, not as identity politics, but as lived ethics, obedience, humility, and service. He will teach through action rather than sermons, showing humanity what submission to God truly looks like. He will marry, live a normal human life, and eventually pass away like all human beings, proving once and for all his humanity. This final chapter affirms that no matter how elevated a prophet is, he remains a servant of God. This belief dismantles the idea of divine incarnation and restores God's absolute oneness. For American audiences struggling with spiritual confusion, institutional distrust, and moral fatigue, this Islamic narrative offers a powerful alternative understanding of Jesus, one that is coherent, authentic, and deeply meaningful. It connects faith with reason, spirituality with responsibility, and belief with action. Jesus' return in Islam is not a threat to Christianity, but a fulfillment of Jesus' own mission, stripped of human alteration. It invites people to reflect, reassess, and return to the core message that all prophets preach: submission to the one true God, justice, compassion, and accountability. This belief assures humanity that truth will not remain buried forever, and that deception has an end date. Jesus' return is a sign of God's mercy, reminding the world that guidance is never abandoned and that even in the darkest times, divine truth will rise again. Jesus, peace be upon him, returns. According to Islam, his mission will unfold gradually and deliberately, focusing first on restoring truth and establishing justice, and finally, healing a world exhausted by deception. Islam teaches that Jesus will not arrive in isolation, but within a broader divine plan already in motion. A righteous leader, known as the Mahdi, will already be guiding the believers, restoring moral order and resisting corruption. Jesus will join this community, not as a superior figure demanding authority, but as a humble servant of God, praying behind the Mahdi, demonstrating unity, humility, and continuity of prophetic guidance. This moment is deeply symbolic, showing that Jesus does not come to replace the final message, but to affirm it. This act alone dismantles centuries of misunderstanding by proving that Jesus aligns himself with pure monotheism and submission to God. The return of Jesus will also mark the collapse of false religious authority structures that thrived on confusion, fear, and blind loyalty. Islam teaches that truth has a weight that falsehood cannot withstand. Once Jesus clarifies his true identity, many people will experience a spiritual awakening, realizing that what they followed was tradition rather than revelation. This will not be enforced through coercion, but through clarity. People will recognize truth when it stands before them without distortion. Jesus will rule with wisdom, mercy, and fairness, correcting injustice without revenge and restoring dignity to the oppressed. His leadership will redefine power, shifting it from domination to service. This resonates strongly with modern American ideals that reject authoritarianism and seek ethical leadership grounded in accountability. Islam teaches that during Jesus' rule, religious sincerity will increase not through forced belief, but because hearts will reconnect with God. Hypocrisy will diminish because truth will be visible. People will live with purpose rather than fear, and faith will no longer be reduced to slogans, but lived through character, honesty, and compassion. Jesus will eliminate systems of exploitation, ending unjust wealth, accumulation, and economic oppression. As justice spreads, charity will increase, and poverty will decline to the point where wealth will lose its central grip on human motivation. This transformation addresses one of the deepest crises in modern society, the loss of meaning driven by materialism. Jesus will restore balance, reminding humanity that success is not measured by accumulation, but by righteousness. Islam teaches that peace during his era will not be limited to humans, but will extend to nature itself, symbolically representing universal harmony. Violence, hostility, and fear will fade as trust and security return. Communities will rebuild relationships fractured by ideology, politics, and religious division. Jesus' return will unify sincere believers across backgrounds, removing artificial barriers created by history and power structures. This unity is not uniformity, but shared submission to God's truth. The return of Jesus also prepares humanity for the final phase of existence, reminding people that life is temporary and accountability is inevitable. This awareness will elevate moral consciousness, encouraging people to act responsibly with integrity, compassion, and humility. Islam emphasizes that Jesus will live a full human life after his return, marrying, building family ties, and participating in society, showing that spirituality does not require isolation but engagement. This model directly challenges modern misconceptions that faith is detached from real life. Jesus will demonstrate balance between worship, work, family, and social responsibility. His eventual passing away will be a powerful moment, confirming that even the greatest prophet remains human, subject to God's decree. This closes the chapter of misunderstanding forever, leaving no room for future distortion. The Islamic narrative of Jesus' return offers Americans searching for authenticity a version of faith that is intellectually coherent, spiritually fulfilling, and morally grounded. It presents Jesus not as an abstract theological puzzle, but as a living example of devotion, humility, and justice. His return assures humanity that truth is not lost, even when buried under centuries of alteration. It reminds people that God's guidance continues until the very end, and that justice, mercy, and clarity will ultimately prevail. This belief transforms fear of the end times into hope, encouraging individuals to live ethically, prepare spiritually, and seek truth sincerely. Jesus' return in Islam is not about destruction, but restoration, not about dominance, but guidance, not about fear, but accountability. It is the final correction of history, ensuring that Jesus' true mission is known, honored, and fulfilled under the banner of pure monotheism, submission to God, and justice for all humanity as the era of Jesus, peace be upon him, continues. According to Islamic belief, the world will experience a transformation unlike any other in human history, because this change will not be driven by technology, ideology, or political power, but by restored truth, clarity, and sincere submission to God. Jesus will not rule as a distant authority issuing commands from palaces, but as a present moral guide, whose life itself becomes the lesson. His conduct will embody balance between worship, responsibility, mercy, and justice, demonstrating that true leadership is rooted in humility and service. Islam teaches that during this time, lies will no longer thrive because truth will be visible. Hypocrisy will fade because sincerity will become the norm, and fear will diminish because justice will be firmly established. Jesus will rebuild the moral compass of humanity, reminding people that accountability to God is the foundation of all ethics. This era will expose how far humanity had drifted when revelation was replaced by desire and power, when people witness a prophet living without arrogance, wealth, obsession, or domination. They will rediscover what faith was always meant to be: devotion, integrity, and responsibility. Jesus will not divide people by labels, but will unite hearts around truth, removing artificial barriers created by history, institutions, and manipulated narratives. This unity will feel especially meaningful to American audiences living in a deeply polarized society searching for common moral ground. Islam teaches that under Jesus' leadership, truth will no longer be filtered through institutions, but seen directly, lived openly, and practiced sincerely. This will mark the final correction of misunderstandings surrounding Jesus' identity, mission, and message. His presence will permanently close the door to future theological distortion, because the truth will be established not through texts alone, but lived reality. Jesus will remind humanity that prophets were never sent to be worshipped, but to guide people to worship God alone. This restoration of pure monotheism will reconnect humanity with its original purpose, bringing inner peace, clarity, and direction. After fulfilling his mission, Jesus will live out the remainder of his life as a normal human being, experiencing family, community, and society, reinforcing the Islamic principle that holiness is not separation from life, but righteousness within it. His eventual death will not be a tragedy, but a completion of divine wisdom, proving conclusively that he was always human, always a servant, always dependent on God. This moment will end centuries of confusion, permanently, leaving no room for future exaggeration or denial. The world will then move steadily toward its final accountability, having witnessed truth in its purest form. Islam presents this ending not with despair, but with hope, because humanity will have been given clarity, justice, and guidance until the very last chapter. Jesus' return in Islam assures believers that God does not abandon humanity, even at its lowest point, and that truth always has a final word. This belief encourages people today to seek sincerity, humility, and righteousness rather than power, image, or blind tradition. For Americans wrestling with faith, identity, and meaning, this narrative offers a grounded, compelling, and coherent understanding of Jesus that aligns faith with reason, spirituality with responsibility, and belief with action. It shows that loving Jesus does not require abandoning monotheism, and honoring him does not require worshiping him. It restores Jesus to his rightful place as one of the greatest prophets sent to guide humanity back to God. His return is the ultimate act of mercy, correcting history, healing division, and reaffirming the timeless message that salvation lies in worshiping the one true God, living justly, and preparing for accountability. This is how Islam explains the return of Jesus. Not as the end of hope, but as the fulfillment of truth. Not as a contradiction of faith, but as its restoration. Not as fear, but as clarity, justice, and mercy for all humanity.